Some generations were trained to be professional, while others were trained to be human. And now everyone is in the same Slack channel. Isn't that fun? Welcome to the Generational Edge with Kristina Green podcast, where we translate the friction at work before it escalates. And I'm Kristina Green, your generational translator, giving you the straight talk. So today we're talking about permission to be real and why different generations actually define that authentic leadership completely different. Today's guest is Cherie Caldwell, an HR and leadership thought leader who's helped build high performing teams inside some of the most complex organizations out there, including Comcast, NBC Universal, the Home Depot, Delta Airlines, and SalesLoft. Now, through Cherie Caldwell Company, she works with leaders to strengthen team dynamics and alignment. So performance and people don't feel like they're in competition. And since authentic leadership is everywhere right now and often a slogan more than a practice, we're going to get real specific today. And that's exactly what we're doing. So, Cherie, thank you so much for joining me today.
I am super thrilled to be here. I'm very excited. I love this topic. I am big on talking about how to be more effective at work. And most of it boils down to communication and respect.
That's right. That's right. We're absolutely going to get into that. And I definitely want to hear your thoughts on it. So, without further ado, let's just dive right in. So, when you hear leaders say, bring your whole self to work, right? What do you think they actually mean? And what do you think that those employees are actually hearing on the other side?
Right. I think what people are trying to say is that you can be open here, you can share your ideas, you can be creative. I think all of those things are good intentions. But what I think people hear on the other side is, yeah, right. That it depends. If you're saying all that, but there's a culture where you can't really disagree with the leader, where if you're not yesing them or checking the box, people do not feel that because you said it, that it's so. And I think
Right.
that's the disconnect. And then you will totally turn off the younger generations because they'll just view that as very hypocritical. And you're talking out of one side of your head, but doing something else on the other. And so that will then destroy leadership credibility.
Yeah,
Definitely destroy leadership credibility. And then you will find that you will lose some people because of that. So it
absolutely.
sounds good and it sounds trendy, but don't say it if you don't mean it. Or don't say it if you don't understand what it is.
That's right. That's right. Because I mean, we understand, right, that without you cannot have psychological safety without trust, right?
Right.
Everything is rooted in trust. And if you are trying to foster this appearance, right, this facade of trust in the workplace by saying, oh, you can be yourself here. But then it's kind of like a saloon door that just like pops them on the backside on the other side of authenticity, then all you're doing is actually is breaking that trust. You're damaging, right, the foundation that you're trying to build, right?
And that's exactly right. And I think the mistake people make is they think that, oh, I'm a trustworthy leader, that creates the trust. Or I want people to feel safe and they can say whatever they want to. And then they don't recognize their own behaviors. Like you have to be intentional. It doesn't just show up. It is around building relationship. It's around creating the space. It's making sure that when people say something you don't agree with, you listen to it, you take it in, and you thank them for their contribution, right? And then it's like, we don't have to agree, but we want to have the space where people can say what's really on their mind. And the truth is, and I know you know this, but for the sake of conversation for everyone, most workplaces aren't there. They're not really putting in the work. And while engagement and engagement surveys are helpful, it still takes a little bit more work and a bit more intentionality to be there. And I think the big thing, as you know from the generational work that you do, is that we don't all have the same definition when we use these words. So not only is it from a generational standpoint where we all have those context in the generations that we grew up in, but there's also our thinking styles and other things that kind of impact how we define authenticity and how we define safety in the workplace. And so for me, and I know you too, that the work that we do around inclusion is really about that. And I think that what we want to do to reassure the business people is that all of this is in the name of better performance, better business results, and that there's real scientific data to back that up. And so we're not just saying, oh, this is great. Let's hold hands, sing songs, and braid each other's hair. We're actually talking about how can we make a more productive business? How can we make a more effective business? How can we get better customer service, better results? And it's because we're paying attention to the people that deliver these things for us. And
Yeah.
that's what we're focused on. And that's why this is important.
Yeah. And too often I hear leaders lean into the negativity, the language around entitlement,
Yeah.
around, I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm not going
Yes.
to, miss me with your boundaries. All of these things have this negative connotation because it actually starts to get into very uncomfortable spaces that, let's just face it, right? As older generations who have helped to shape and have also to inherited the work environment, we've had to just kind of fall in line,
Yeah.
right? And so there was no such thing as boundaries when
Right.
our careers were developing, in their infancy. But it is a real thing today. And so it's getting to uncomfortable territory with the explosion of the greater acceptance of therapy, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
commonplace now for people to speak openly about how they are working on themselves.
Yes.
That was completely taboo when you
Oh, for
start thinking
sure.
about how the boomer and Gen X generation, even I will say some of the older millennials, we didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about
Right.
feelings either in our families and certainly not at work.
Yes.
So it's an uncomfortable, uncharted territory of what is now kind of authenticity. And now there's this debate around authenticity versus professionalism,
Yes.
right? And so that's what I want to ask you a question is where does this professionalism actually kind of help, right? It helps in the corporate environment, but maybe where does it become a scapegoat or a mask, right? Something that we hide
Right,
behind.
right. I think that sometimes people can use professionalism to set a boundary about how you must behave. And it can kill authenticity because professionalism can act like censorship. It can act like you shouldn't say this. Whereas when you're talking about authenticity, it is not a license to be so candid that you can be cruel. It's not that. You have to have accountability with how you share information. So the part where professionals can help is in talking about respect, is in owning the impact of your feedback so that you deliver it with care.
Right.
But it is also the authenticity part of it is being truthful, is being insightful, is sharing your perspective, and recognizing that our truth is just one of the truths, right? Because it's intermingled with our perspective and our background and our upbringing. And so back to the generationals, every generation could see that same set of data very differently. So then it's
Right.
understanding that your perspective is a perspective. And the point is to get everybody's perspective to help influence better decision making because you have more perspectives, more data, more information, and then you can come to maybe a better conclusion, right? Or better decision. When we lean into professionalism, a way to censor and to shut other people down, we miss out on that. And there's so many good examples. I mean, I don't, when I've done research on this topic, it's like people go way back. They'll even bring up the Bay of Pigs. Certainly, the Challenger had technology issues, but a big factor in that was the groupthink and the lack of ability to speak truthfully about what was going on. And had that happened, then the technology concerns would have come up and would have been dealt with, but they were ignored, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's really important to understand that your business may not implode, but that you could have more innovative ideas. You can have a reduction in time to market. You can have less stress in the work environment. It can be more collaborative. All of those things are the science behind why to do this. And so hiding out behind professionalism or leaning into authenticity as a reason to be cruel and super candid in a cutting way actually won't help you achieve those results. So both extremes are there, right? And it's like the accountability is what will help bring the conversation to maybe the right place, if you will, because it's owning your behavior, it's owning your delivery while you bring your perspective to the table. And I think that's the piece. Professionalism can be really code for please don't say anything.
Right.
Please behave
Right.
in this box.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
it's kind of you've heard me use this term before, corporate parenting, right? Where
Yes.
we, especially as mothers, it's like our children should not don't embarrass me, right?
Yes.
So act like you have
Yes.
some manners, right?
Yes.
And you were taught well. And so it's kind of I get the kind of similar energy around professionalism because
Yes.
it's the adoption of these, cultural dominant norms as well, which I mean, let's just face it, are not necessarily formed for people who look like you and me, right?
Exactly.
They're formed based on different ideals, and even also to having, access to different garments, right?
Yes.
So even to dress a certain way, to have
Yeah.
your hair a certain way, women to have their makeup a certain way. I was talking just the other day with another guess around the term. We were decoding demure, right? Which is
Ooh.
rooted in this idea around what is professional, what is the presentation of self, right? Which is really kind of rooted in the 1950s culture, right?
Oh,
Where
yes.
women wore dresses and everything was ironed and men wore slacks and suits and ties, and there was a understanding of what professionalism was that existed both in the workplace and in your everyday life.
Yes.
And that carrying over into what we have today, and this idea or the adaptation of demure in this way was actually started a kind of a you know what I mean? Kind of a way of we're calling it kind of like a generational code switching,
Yes.
right? To say, listen, I hear your standards, your
Yes.
expectations, right? But I'm going to play in your face and you're not even going to know it,
Right.
right? By saying demure,
Yes.
because it's the tone that you
Yes.
take, in this space. But what is that fine line? Because to your point, the extremes,
Yes.
right? Of professional versus, maybe the opposite. And this
Right.
understanding of how we adapt. And, Steve Jobs said it best, or you can like him or hate him, but he said the best idea has to win,
Yes.
right? And being able to give a platform for the innovation, for the ideas that need to
Yes.
happen, need to be said it
Yes.
openly, it's how do we balance that
Yeah.
with this idea of professionalism? Because professionalism also too is about identifying, or more so accepting the hierarchy, right?
Right.
How do you kind of foster or cultivate an environment where everyone can have an opportunity to have a voice if you're still trying to carry this burden of being professional? What are your
Right.
thoughts?
Oh, well, so you know what? I did some research on Google's Project Aristotle. And
Hmm.
Google is famous for doing its research projects. And on this particular one, I think they examined like 180 teams. They probably ran like 35 statistical models, all of that. And they came down to this like conclusion that it doesn't really matter who's on the team, it's the how the team works, right? And that's really telling. And psychological safety was the most important thing, followed by dependability, clarity on job expectations, et cetera, right? And so it's like seniority, tenure, none of that mattered as much in terms of getting things done. And so the point of psychological safety is not about reinforcing hierarchy. I think that comes into play once all the ideas are on the table, and it's like, okay, well, there's a final decision that has to be made. And having open, honest conversation doesn't imply that we all have to agree. As a matter of fact, we should expect that we don't. And then somewhere along the line, the buck has to stop with someone to make the decision. And that might be done by hierarchy because it doesn't have to involve consensus decision making, right? And sometimes consensus decision making can be problematic because then you
Right,
kind of dummy down to the idea versus the best idea winning. So if you go
right.
with what Steve Jobs said, it's like the best idea winning is going to be kind of controversial. It should bring about great debate, right? Because there should have been many ideas on the table. And so if we make it about the work versus about the positions, we'll get to that best idea. And then after the work is said and done and someone has to make the call, then that's just the way we run. But it doesn't mean that people weren't heard, weren't involved, weren't included. As a matter of fact, they should feel good about that at the time we get to the decision because all of that discussion took place. And I think that's the part where we have to get to, that it's not about the hierarchy. The hierarchy will work itself out. People have responsibility that comes down into job clarity and job expectations, but it doesn't have to do anything with the work team getting its project done or having great debate and dialogue to decide on how to get to the best decision and getting there. And the
That's right.
teams and the organizations that can split that up, like make sure, because it's not about permission to run amok. It's not about being
Right.
super nice to everybody. It's not about somebody getting their way because they spoke up, Great. Back to that's one opinion in the mix. Thank you. Right. And now we have to take all of this. But it's
Mhm.
about freedom to say all those things because you're not going to get dinged if you make a mistake, if you say something wrong, or if you say something disagreeable, or if you bring up a tough issue. Right. And people are going to accept the differences. So that's the other piece of it when you think about the generations. How do we encourage people to accept that these things are different? And how do we look for the commonalities so that that will spur them into the conversation, right? And the bottom line is being okay with taking a risk. Because if people aren't okay with taking a risk in your organization, they're not going to speak up. They're not going to give the ideas. They're not going to, the innovation won't move because your team is going to feel like you don't really mean it,
Right.
And it's the important part of psychological safety is not about making psychological safety. That is the tool that enables business results. So if
That's
people
right.
get that it's an enabler, they'll understand the reason we do this is to drive business, and they'll really be more intentional about it. It's the same reason you put your spreadsheets together to track your finances. It's a tool that enables you to have clarity around where you are. This is a tool that enables innovation, it enables great problem solving, and it enables stronger and maybe I'll say it better decisions because you've had all that input in the
Yeah.
mix.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it, hierarchy has a place
Right.
in the execution, not in the ideation,
Yes,
right?
that's it.
That's the gatekeeping.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a great way to say that.
Oh
I love
man.
that.
Well, look at this. We're solving workplace friction today. I love it.
Well, I'm just going to say it, right? Because when I look at how our current leadership in the USA is functioning, I see a lack of psychological safety at the senior levels of this country. And I feel like that is, you can see that we're not making great strides on problem solving um, in a collaborative sense. And it concerns me because I think because we're missing opportunities for the debate and the discussion, we're shutting those things down because we really are lining up on differences and making the differences a bigger thing than they need to be. And we're then an us versus them. We are not going to make progress until we learn how to collaborate and do that in a better sense. And I feel like there's spaces in corporate America that are doing this, that have, I mean, I think about the research Google did, in terms of their teams. And there's a reason that they're innovative and coming up with things. There's probably a reason that Apple is. And I feel like there are places that demonstrate, and still, we're not even doing it that well yet, right? This is still,
Right.
despite the fact we've been talking about psychological safety a while, there's still opportunity for getting better at this. There's still opportunity for inclusion. And I feel like right now, we're not even getting the best of the role modeling out there. And it's going to be problematic for people to actually figure out how to do it. I think that there's
Mhm.
enough research that any company that's interested, there's enough resources like you and me in terms of helping people get that. Um, and I think that if people really understood the benefit of it, we would stop some of the behavior that we're doing.
Yeah.
We would be intentional about creating spaces for people to disagree and to look for the best idea to win.
Yeah. And if we could stop leaning into the negative energy around what our thoughts, our presumptions of what
Yeah,
that means, right? We do not have to be and become or evolve into this organism, right? Or the organization that is having
yeah,
kumbaya lunches,
yes,
followed by, yoga and tea. That's the extreme. And I cannot tell you how many times I hear this flippant language being tossed around. That's not what this means. I'm not asking you to join
exactly.
hands with your staff. I'm
Right.
asking you to start to learn how to listen a little differently, right? Not just as the leader, but now also too for your staff, those individual contributors. How can you understand your leadership a little differently, right? Because you have to
Well, the
speak into
truth is, I
their
love what
listening.
you
Absolutely.
do.
But
And I think the thing you just said was so important, that it isn't about holding hands. As a matter of fact, this will be uncomfortable. When we get into the disagreements, this is about uncomfortableness. It's not nice. It's being kind though, right?
right.
It is. You don't step around the discomfort. You speak up about the thing that's causing the problem. And that might hurt some feelings. It might cause some discomfort, for the person delivering the message and for the person receiving the message. But
Yep.
people are committed to doing that because it provides a way to solve something and actually, um, make the organization stronger and better, right? Because it should move something out of the way. It should move an obstacle. It should solve a problem. It should fix something. It should provide ease or better serves the customer because we were willing to engage in the conversation. So if you're thinking that it's about holding hands, well, nope, that's not it at
Yeah.
all. Quite
No.
the
Yeah.
opposite. Yeah.
You're missing the point. This is
Yeah.
the work that is necessarily not only to for all of us, and I mean every generation, because everyone thinks that they have it right.
Yes.
Everyone does, right? So
Yes.
the boomers kind of like, why don't they just fall in line?
Yes.
And like this is the way it's always been. Gen X is like, I tried to tell you, I've been trying, I can never change this, right? So just settle down and stop making, making ruffles. Millennials are like, but I'm out here doing what you say I'm supposed to do. And
Yes.
but I'm still not getting to where I'm trying to be. And Gen Z are like, listen, my parents raised me who are Gen X, right? Not to do with any of this nonsense. I don't need you.
Exactly. And wait a
So
minute, I have
all of
an appointment, please. Let me hit my therapist because you all are stressing me out.
right. And so all of that is converging in the workplace. And
Yes.
we wonder why performance reviews go terribly, why there
Yeah.
are massive layoffs, why there are, quiet quitting, quiet cracking, why
Yes.
people are on the spot resigning and say, no, I'm done with this. It's
Yes.
because it's it's sure burnout is part of it, but it's also the fact that people are just passing each other on their
Yes.
communication,
They
right?
really are.
And many of them are just stubborn like I am, who are just not willing to change.
Yes.
So, in order to hear that change is even necessary and possible.
Yes.
So,
Well, I would even encourage people, it's not about changing who you are to accommodate anything. I think if you put in respect and, accountability for how you deliver and how you engage with the team, like I said, this is not a license to go be cruel, dump on people, and do those types of things. It is in the vein of problem solving, creating better processes, better products, all of those. And so it is not about you changing, but it is about you communicating. And it
yes,
is about you listening in a way that doesn't require anybody else to change either. If you're not going to change, give the same courtesy and then
that's
like
right.
learn where they're coming from. And at the end of the day, I mean, the generational constructs give us insight, but you still have to get to know individuals, you know?
Thank you.
And I think
Yeah.
that that is the piece. I think you're right on that. Communication is like the foundation, and then accountability, I think, is the other piece of it. And if you want to be safe at work, then you want to make sure you're allowing other people to be safe and that you're creating safety for them, that you're not causing damage, right? And so there's like
Mhm.
a do no harm.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, in the spirit of doing no harm, let's get honest for
Yes.
about 90 seconds,
Okay.
okay? And I'm going to rapid fire a couple phrases to you, and you tell me whether or not it is real or performative.
Ooh,
And we are not calling out any organizations. We are simply speaking the truth and
okay,
honesty around what's real and what's actually performative in the workplace. So, are you
okay.
ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go. How about we value transparency?
Ooh, if you have to say it, I don't think you're doing it. I would call that performative. It should be known. Your people should be telling you that you value transparency. Thank you very much.
Amen. How about open door policy?
Oh, I don't, again, that's one of those, if you have to say it, are you doing it? To me, instead of having open door policy, have the leaders go out and walk the floors and be, remember the walking by managing by walking around thing? That's way old. That's still good. It's like go to other people's space. Don't just sit there and wait for them to come. That's not a real invitation.
Yeah. Yeah. Be
Yeah.
proactive, right?
Yes.
Instead of
Yes.
reactive.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. How about culture fit?
Ooh, that is code for I want to only get people that are like me.
Oh, man. We could have a whole podcast
We
on just
really could.
that.
I'm trying to hold myself back. We may have to talk again.
How about unlimited PTO?
Okay, if you really have it, that's real. People do appreciate that. I have had people sing praises for that and say that's why they've stuck around at places. So yes,
All
that can,
right.
if you have it, they love it.
All right. How about growth mindset?
Mm. That's one of those, is it real or is it not? I think if people are talking about it and they give examples of it and you can see it in action, or people are encouraging you to grow, then yes. Otherwise, it's like if you're not really training and developing people, can you say you have a growth mindset? And I think that's, and as an individual, you can take it on. But if your company is trying to create a culture of continuous learning, then just do that, you
Yes.
know?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And last one, speak up culture.
Ooh, again, that's if psychological safety is not present. Back to, if you have to say it, do you really have it?
Yeah.
And I find a lot of people give lip service, and this is where the Gen Z gets like upset. It's like that's where the hypocrisy is for them. Because if you say it and they don't see it, that's huge. It is so much better to let it be there and let people come and say, this is why I feel great here. And this is why they do employee referrals. You don't have to call it out. It's just a part of how people do it. You know, your values line
Mhm.
up with your behavior. And I think that is what speaks loudly more so than the phrases you have to have. I think
Absolutely.
they're performative. If it's not living there and you're just talking about it, stop. You're causing
Yeah.
more damage by doing that.
I can't help to tell you, but the engagement surveys are what come to mind when I think about this.
Oh,
And I loathe, now, you know me, I'm not in HR,
yes.
right? And but I have experienced HR and the things that I associate with HR, right? One of them is the engagement survey every
Understood.
year that you were forced to do, that they would report out results and tie it to some whatever high in the sky strategy, and you'd never hear another whisper about it,
Oh, yes.
right? So
Yes.
it's like, so you collectively pay your entire staff, right? Your entire workforce. Let's just itemize it if it costs about 30 minutes of time per. How many millions of dollars is that to do
Yes.
to respond to something that you're never going to actually take action on?
Yeah. That's one of those
Sorry.
things where it's performative and not real. If someone's
Right.
not coming back and saying, this is what you told us and this is what we're doing about it, then don't do it. Because that gives people the expectation that you really care about what they say and that
Right.
you want to do something with it. And what happens is if you keep doing that, then the survey loses its value because people don't take it seriously. I'm not even sure they answer it in a sincere fashion anymore if you've given off the impression that you don't really care.
Right.
I agree. If you're going to do it well, and make sure you respond and share the
Right.
information and then take action.
Right. Because you don't want the honesty to come on the exit interview. You want the
No.
honesty.
No, you don't. It's good to have, but it's too late at that point in time.
That's right. That's right. Oh, Cherie, thank you so much for playing along with me. Now we're going to move into another segment, which I like to call decoding the generations. And
Okay.
so
Ooh.
in
Okay.
in this conversation, we've been talking about this concept of professionalism.
Okay.
So I want to know from your take, right? Because this is something that's being thrown around and has for quite some time. What are your insights about what professionalism and kind of how it's landing today in the
Mm.
workplace?
And I think that's hard because I think you're right that the different generations see it differently. I think if there are still traditionalists out there in some work environments, and I'm sure there are, back to what you said about the suits and the dresses and the appropriate dress, like dress code was a thing. With Gen Z, not so much. And if you're in a tech company, does it even exist? You know, um,
Right.
I think that um, there's the professionalism around how you look, and then the not necessarily being stoic, but definitely not emotional, as you said earlier this today. It's like you're not expressing all this emotion. You definitely aren't sharing personal tidbits. You may have a picture of your family, that type of thing. You may say hello, you had a good weekend, but generally it's more surface. I think the boomers had a little bit of that because they were brought up with it, but they're more into face to face and maybe having some dialogue, but they're very much into working hard and long and putting in the face time and the hours. This, I think, was why Gen X got into more work life balance. I think it started with them. I think there were a mix of the boomers on that end, but I think it really started with them and probably became more apparent with the Zennials and the Millennials, right? Like this is a thing. But I'm thinking they're looking for autonomy. Please don't micromanage me. I'm not stupid. I know what to do. you know, um,
Right.
I think millennials really got into the belonging. I think there was the more of the inclusion work started coming up then, and we used to have an understanding that DEI was about making business better, not about what's happening with it now. So I think it's been a term that's been distorted from what it was intended to be. And so, if we just stick with belonging and inclusion and understanding that this is about getting good business results, then I think then we can still get the work done that's important to do. So I think for millennials, belonging was huge, and then I think for Gen Z is really about values and walking the talk, right? And I think it is so not about um, face-to-face meetings and wasting time in those. It is so not about dress code. It is work-life balance, but it is around walking the talk and doing your values. And that is what professionalism is, that you do what you say and that there's that connection for it, right? Um, to me, I think that's the way the professionalism shows up is in what they value in each of the generations, and then how they show up with that value embedded in them.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
because this concept of professionalism was really kind of a tool to help large organizations to scale because they could standardize their expectations,
Yes.
right? So when in the formation, right, of corporate, right, it really started with the traditionalist and boomers, continue to carry that on, carry that forth.
Right.
Same with
Right.
Gen X. And part of it is because not only in the standardization, it also too became cues around trust,
Yes.
right? So if you are professional, then I can trust you that you will be reliable, that I
Right.
can put you in front of my clients, that I
Right.
can trust that you will show up when you say that that you're going to or when you're
Right.
supposed to, and that you will exercise some level of discretion,
Right.
right? Meaning leave yourself, your personal self at home. I don't care
Right.
who you are personally, right? But you'll leave that person at home and you'll do this job while you're here, right?
Right.
And Gen X really kind of took that, just continue to carry that torch to your point, trying to find that work life balance because there the number of hours, right? The expectation around, well, how do you get to the next level? Professionalism was about how you're working your way up that ladder, right?
Right.
And so it was climbing that ladder, and how do you do so in a way that means leveraging skills around efficiency,
Right.
resiliency,
Right.
autonomy, right? which
Right.
are hallmarks of the Gen X generation. You
Yes.
don't have to tell them what to do. They, in fact, have built the infrastructure for 90% of organizations that exist today,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, and millennials just wanting to be able to understand, how do I get that torch, right?
Yes.
Where's that ladder for me? That ladder turned into a lattice, right? So,
Yes.
horizontal, moving left and right, and then taking steps down, and it's frustrated the heck out of them because the leaders who they've been following, millennials value communication and
Yes.
transparency, and they're not receiving that, especially from generations who are very resilient and like, I didn't have to be told to do something, right?
Right.
I just did it.
Right.
And millennials also too are working from a different playbook. That, wait a minute, tell me what success looks like. How do I
Right.
get up that ladder? Where
Right.
is the ladder,
Right.
right? And Gen Z missing the whole thing. I say Gen Z is the only one in the car, the passenger in the car, who could care less about the existence of a ladder, a title, a
Yeah,
lattice. They don't care. They honestly, the job is satisfying. It's a means to an end,
it
right? It
is.
helps to fund
It is
their
so I
life.
can live. Yes. Yes. But they
Exactly.
do want to be someplace where there's purpose and meaning, right? And again,
That's
back to the
right.
hypocrisy. And it's just going to be interesting to see the impact they fully have in the workplace. Because I think, is it millennials or Gen X that's the majority of the workplace now? Is it, which one is it?
Well, Gen X are the majority of the leaders right now, but
Okay.
millennials are, yeah, are the
So the bigger
majority.
population. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
So I think as we continue on, it'll be interesting to see how the impact. But I'm hopeful because Gen Z cares so much about transparency and inclusivity that they're going to be the generation that really helps us embed psychological safety. So I think that there's an opportunity there because of the nature of their kind of generation. I don't know, just my
Yeah.
hypothesis. We'll see.
No, and I think you're right, and I think there's a job that we have as Gen X and even boomers, right, to help kind of cultivate and shape that, because
Yeah.
there's the risk that we will lose all of the gains because there aren't Fortune 500 companies for no reason because, call it toxic if you want, but it worked,
Right.
right?
Right.
Doesn't mean that we have to stay there. It just means that we have to evolve. But it
Right.
doesn't mean we have to start, pushing people out the car and saying, this is, a Gen Z car. That's not the
Right.
way that this works. It
Right.
says that we now start assigning roles within the card that, to and giving turns to the driver's seat, right?
Right.
Everyone has a voice in that space. And
Right.
if we don't start to turn this corner together now, then in the next 10 years, millennials are going to be moving into those leadership positions,
Right.
right? They'll be the majority of them. And like it or not, Gen Z are going to be part of that.
Yes.
Now, I mean, the oldest Gen Z right now just turned 30,
Right.
right? So, so it's worth considering because Gen Z needs to know. Listen, don't let go of the older generation just because you think you can't learn anything from them.
Right.
Just like the older generations don't let go of the younger generations because you think that they can't be taught anything because
Right.
they, AI their life away, right?
Right.
That's not. We've got to be able to find a better median in
I
all of this.
agree. And I know, mutual mentoring is a thing, but it really can make a difference, right? It's like one of those ways to help people um, stop doing the us versus them and kind of build an us culture. How do
That's
we
right.
get there? And it doesn't mean we're all alike or we know we don't have the same definition of professionalism, but we do embed accountability and respect and communication. And that goes a long way. That goes a very long way.
I love that. That is a great way to wrap us up. And Cherie, so now I want to how I know everyone has been listening so far. They want to know, how do we connect with Cherie? And so
Oh God.
I definitely want to show, here is her website, but tell the world, any of our listeners, how
Yes.
can they connect with you?
Well, I do have a complimentary ideation session. So if you hit my website, you can sign up for some time. I will definitely talk to you whether you need it on a personal leadership basis or whether you're looking to help your leadership team get more effective. So back to the team conversation. that we were having. That this is a thing. Psychological safety is the foundation of having a super effective and super productive team. So I can definitely help with that. I'm happy to discuss your personal needs at that time.
Love it. Love it. And here I'll also to put a QR code to Cherie's LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with her, definitely connect with her because there's lots of information not only to be gained in a one-on-one conversation, but just exploring really the universe around Cherie. So Cherie, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you very much for giving and sharing your insights with my audience. I definitely looking forward to having a part 2 on this because we've got some other things to
Yes,
discuss.
yes, we do. All right. Well, have a great rest of your week.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, so in closing, you've been listening to The Generational Edge with Kristina Green, your generational translator. And if today's episode has felt a little uncomfortable and maybe a little accurate, well, good. That is the whole point. We're having honest conversations about real events. Share it now, share this with a leader, someone who you think maybe needs to understand how to be more real, or they say to be more real, but maybe are not too comfortable with doing it once it actually starts to show up at their door, right? But in the meantime, subscribe to get more generational translation. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Thank you so much, Cherie. Thank you, everyone, for listening.